I am Pastor Michael T. Smith, and I am so glad to have you join us. Maybe for the first time, you're a first-timer at the Church of. We get new people each week saying, hey, it's so funny. People saying, I didn't know you had a church. I was on Nothing Else Matters for all 3 years. I didn't know what happened to you. I just found out about it. Well, we're glad you found out about it. And some people said, man, I used to go to your church back in Florida, and man, I'm glad you found out about it. Welcome. Good things are happening, and it's a precious church. We are in week 9. Which, on one end seems like, golly, 9 weeks. And on the other hand, it's just the beginning. What did the carpenters say? We've only just begun to live and to preach and to empower you to live in this authentic human experience we call the incarnational experience. You're living in the material, spirits living in the material world, having your life and waking up to that you are alive for this very precious time is living and seeing others and responding to them empathetically, compassionately, with the love that God has for us and that love shining as embodied love towards others. That is religion, and that is what our church is about. And so we are here every week. This is another week to stretch you, to strengthen you, to encourage you, to provoke you, and to enlarge your heart, to provoke your larger self that has been image seated in the likeness of God. With the intuitive knowing of the truth of God, so that larger self can rise up and push through the stubborn ground of that small self, that chaos conditioned us. And we've been doing it week by week, and here we are again. So welcome. If you're a first-timer, you'll fit right in. You'll start to get the message and things like that, and we'll go through. If you're a long-timer, thank you for coming in. Thank you for your support of us. Being part of this church has two sides. That was kind of like the Churchill, sorry, I feel like I'm Vivian Bastard, right, in the young ones, right? But it has two sides. You're coming, getting empowered by this word. Connie and I praying for you, covering you, teaching you, stretching and strengthening you, and you say, God, that is changing my life, and here I am showing value by what I get out, showing value by showing support, that the stuff I'm getting week in and week out for these teachings, I support that. But then all our other religious energy, our tithes, our offerings, our building funds, all the stuff we put into the church institution, now that we're not trying to convert people to get on the right side before they die, but we're now living in true religion, living as Christ, right? The embodiment of God, the embodiment of love, the body of Christ. We're already in community. We're already reaching out. We're already doing the highest form of ministry and taking all of that time, all of those resources, all of those expertise, all of our gifts and talents, everything we are used to putting in the local building so that we can, win souls and get them on the right team before they die. We're not using our energy for that anymore. We're using now all our resources and energy to day by day say, God, how can I today? That's your daily prayer. As your pastor, I challenge you that. I challenge you to do two things. Number one, if you're receiving value, I challenge you to show support to us for that value. And then number two, if you have been touched by love, I challenge you to pray, God, every day, let me walk before my feet hit the floor. Let me purpose to live as an ongoing embodiment of love. And that is what our church is about. Okay, so with that being said, those prelims out of the way, I am Michael T. Smith. This is the Church of. And here is your message for the week of June 30th, 2024. Okay, congratulations. We started out very simple thing. We were doing LGBTQ Friends and Family Day back at the beginning of June. And boy, you talk about setting off a firestorm. I didn't mean to upset anybody, but I do know that this is a sensitive subject. And I can't believe we've done 4 weeks now into a 5th week on it, our final week, our closeout week on this. And somebody said, why in the world would you talk about gay folks for 5 weeks in a row? I get it. I hear it. Just do one service and just move on. Well, that's the thing. We either, throughout the church, we've talked about them negatively as inhuman objects of God's wrath, or we've talked about them kind of this evangelical militarism. We're going to snatch them out of the demon of being gay, and get them turned around. Or we've talked about them in a tolerance fashion. Well, they're over there and we got to love them, but, we're not, we certainly can't join them, but we certainly can't beat them. So we'll just try to love them until they get right and so they don't end up in the hot place. And then, or when we mention the dignity of LGBTQ people, it's like, yeah, hurry up. Let's get back to things that matter. And so it is in this void of history of church, in my own understanding of church. I was in men's conferences where they said God didn't make Adam and Eve, God made Adam and Steve, God made Adam and Eve, and everybody laughing and high-fiving and all the insulting things that have been said. So in all of that history, this series does not exist in a vacuum. Lots of dominoes have fallen into place. And please, I think somebody said, well, I'm just gonna turn this off. I was hoping you were done. Well, the good news is you made it this far. And the good news is that I'm done. And when I'm saying, okay, this is the last part on LGBTQ people, two groups emerge. One group, thankfully this is the smallest group, says, phew, I'm so glad. God, I didn't know when it was going to end. But you have to realize there's another group that goes, oh man, you're done. There's so much you didn't get to. And the two groups are pretty easy to define. The first group is based on othersness, which is, Pastor, you're talking about something that has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. So because it has nothing to do with me, let's move on, right? They're out there fine or whatever, but it doesn't. And what you're saying is, I am not touched by this. This does not affect the deepest part of who I am or my family or people that I love. And so you hear, whew, it's over, but then there's another part which is connected either as an LGBTQ person or as LGBTQ friends and family who have watched the dehumanization, watched the struggle, watched the conflict and self-concept and all of the shame and all of the, I want to be who I am, but is it who I am even good? And how did God make me? This is how I feel, but God wouldn't make a mistake, and being gay is a mistake. And I certainly can't tell anybody, because if I tell, my God, I read the same scriptures everybody else does. I know God hates me. So, so they're not rejoicing. I'm glad he finally got done. They're saying, man, thank you. Wow. I've just got morsels of human dignity out of week by week. And let me say to this in group one, if you are in this group and you say, I'm glad it's done. And I'm going to give you two things. It's okay that you only heard me up to a point. Some people in a series like this, they only journey so far. It's like, okay, fine, they're human, but I'm not going to say it's okay. Or, okay, it's okay, but I'm not saying it's ideal. Or, okay, well, it's fine that it's that way, but I'm not gonna celebrate it and act like it's a good thing. And I want you to know it's okay that you didn't track with me all the way. Why? First of all, it matters not in any of the teachings. Some people love the thing that I talked on: women, moms, girls, and daughters. And somebody said, "Oh, this is so great." And other people said, "Why are we talking about this?" Then I switched over to the LGBTQ, and somebody said, "Oh man, this is really great." And somebody said, "Why are we talking about this?" This is not for you as an individual, right? You're part of this church, not to say, "Give me something that fits exactly where I am." You're part of this church for a stretching of soul, for an enlarging of spirit. It doesn't matter if you agreed with everything. Well, I agree with this point, and I think Pastor Mike went too far here. It's not about you getting to the complete part. It's about you getting in motion. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that where we are at the beginning of the series and where we are now, you have moved. Some of you have moved huge leaps and bounds, and you've written me, spoken to me. This series has been a mirror of your ugliness and dehumanization, of your prejudice, of the things that you've been conditioned by and the things that you've conditioned others. Spoken to me, written to me through tears. And some of you have made many miles in the journey. Others of you only made it a little bit. But here's what I know. I know that no matter what happens, if you're one of those people that say, man, I'm so glad you're done talking about this, I know without a shadow of a doubt, here's where I got you. I tricked you. Like Paul said, I got you with guile. I know without a shadow of a doubt, your heart towards LGBTQ people is larger now than what it was when we began. Is it as large as I've tried to stretch it? I don't think so. Maybe it's not. But is it larger than we started? Yeah, it is. And you will never be able to look at LGBTQ persons the same way. Why? Because through stubborn soil and through fallow ground and through bad religion and false religion and weaponized religion and social conditioning, which I've had in myself that I've had to break up, it's broken up now. And when we end today, you say, well, that was a waste of time. No, it's not, because I know that you may not look at the LGBTQ people in the fullness of the light of Christ, which is what I've been advocating for, but I tell you what, you won't look at them in the same dimness that you did before. And really what I've secretly been up to is this, that the seed that's been deposited in you, the seed of this enlarged view, the seed of the advanced vision of dignity and equality of LGBTQ persons, it's working in you. And that's all it is. And I'm saying this, why are you pausing here? Because I'm saying this, if you're in that first group that's like bothered by this, that's been triggered by this, that's just, and I can't believe this. I love Pastor Mike, but I just can't believe he's saying this. It's all right, my brother. It's all right, my sister, because the seed of the word is working in you. And like so many things in the Bible, think about all the miracles that took place. The King James uses the phrase, and as they went. Or as they walked on. We're closing the series today, and I'm going to be in something new next week, and a brand new thing that I'm so excited about that really affects every single one of us, and I'm ready to teach that. But so even though I'm closing the books on this series, as you go, that seed is going to be germinating, and it's not going to germinate into hatred. It's not going to germinate and bring forth the fruit of prejudice. It's not going to bring forth the fruit of indignity and dehumanization. It's going to bring forth the fruit of, wow, I'm starting to see people more and more like God sees them. And that's okay. Years ago, it would have been Muslims, I can't see them that way, or Catholics, I can't see them as chosen of God, or Hindus, right, or Buddhists, or Protestants. Well, Protestants, they're just so loose, or whatever it is, or Mormons, or Jehovah's Witnesses, or a long time ago it was lepers. You couldn't see lepers. I can't see Samaritans that way. I can't see Babylon. I can't see them. They're not fully people like that. I mean, think of what Paul, if indeed Paul wrote about what he wrote about the Cretans, about how they're all liars and just evil people, and they're by nature children of wildness. That was Paul's perspective of the Gentiles. Not an accurate perspective, but the seed was working in him. And he saw it larger and larger. So now group 2, if you're watching this, and as we conclude today in the next 30 minutes or so, are we good? Are we okay? As we conclude in the next 30 minutes or so, group 2 is saying, wow, I wish you'd have gone farther. Well, it's impossible to address every nuance, right? I mean, we could go on and on and on, although we are having a Q&A session. Just for Active Church TCO people, you'll be getting the email. We're going to, of course, purge our database in the coming weeks. And people say, I want to check out what you're doing. Well, we're moving on from checking out. We're looking for people who are going to find value in what we're doing, and for people who are going to go out and actually make a decision. Okay, my pastor's not asking me to put he's not asking me, come volunteer in the children's ministry, or come help us clean up the church, or come help us, do the lawn, or we need people to, he's not asking that. He's asking us to go out and live as love. And so, but we're going to do a Q&A session. And there may be a place where we can say, okay, let's get down into the nitty gritty of certain things. But the larger truth, and this is, I say this, if you're like, man, I can't believe the series is ending, all the stuff you didn't say, well, the same truth is that I apply to the first group, I apply to you. The seed is working in you. I've deposited a seed, and it's working toward your full self concept. It's working toward your full self and others' dignity. It's working toward your full acceptance. And so if you say, well, you haven't covered my family member situation, or you haven't talked about my son or my daughter or my dad or my husband or my wife or my mom, you haven't talked about my cousin, you haven't talked about my friend, you haven't talked about all those kind of things. But what I have put in you is a seed, and the seed brings forth fruit of itself. And so the seed of the larger picture, the seed of the conversation, the seed of self-dignity and others' dignity, the seed of being at peace out of these heteronormative, weaponized religious doctrines of devils, that seed is working in you. And it may not completely calm. It may not completely soothe. It may not completely mend, but it will work as you go. Now, above all, I pray you've not heard any of this through a political lens. I talked about why do we stop going to church first week, and nobody heard that. Oh, he's getting into politics. But when I talked about the dignity of women, somebody said, well, nah, it's starting to sound a little political here. And man, when we launched over into LGBT, well, there he goes. It's all politics. I'm sorry. None of this has been spoken in the spirit of politics. None of this has been spoken to condemn your politics. None of this has been spoken to affirm your politics. Everything that's been said, I want you to hear it in the spirit in which it's intended. What I'm trying to pass all my thoughts through the filter of the person of Christ, right? Through the prism of the person of Christ. I'm taking all the chaos, all that I've heard, all that I've experienced, all that I was raised in this society, the people that I know, the people that I love, the things that I've said, the people that I've buried, the friends that I lost, and all of that together. And I'm trying to pass all that through, not a political lens to say, well, this side is right or that side is wrong, or there's a conspiracy, or well, I'm passing it through the lens of the person of Christ, because my aim for you at the end of the day as your pastor is a Christ-heartedness. And that Christ-heartedness will lead to Christ-sightedness. But remember, because we're dealing with the living Spirit, it's not just my aim to pass it through the filter of Christ with a goal or a purpose of enlarging in you and provoking in you a Christ-heartedness that's seated in a Christ-sightedness, because what I'm offering is not insight. What I'm offering, what Christ is offering, what my hunger is, what I want you to leave this with is not new insight, but by the Spirit I want you to leave with new eyes. I want you to leave born again. I want you to leave with an inexplicable thing that says, I used to see people one way, but now I see people different. And I don't want you to think, well, Pastor Mike, you gave me some great insights. The work of the Spirit is not great insight. The work of the Spirit is Christ sight. And it doesn't come by information. It comes by new eyes that literally by the Spirit, by the incarnation, by the love of God that's working in us, by the Spirit that's been poured out upon all flesh, the fruit of that Spirit, the work of that Spirit is not giving us new mental information by which to matriculate and metabolize so that we can bring forth new behavior. It's so the work of the Spirit can not just give us new insight, but new eyes with which to see. And that is the work that has been taking place here. So for the last time, as we go in this series, I want to start with, again, someone said, I don't want to hear that. Dear brother in our church, sweet member of our church, I've been around for a long time, said, look, I don't follow you for lessons on psychology and sexuality. This is not a lesson. That's like saying, well, Jesus, I don't follow you for lessons on farming and pulling wheat. I'm not giving you lessons on farming. I'm not giving you lessons on psychology. I'm trying to expand the reality of God's understanding of every human narrative. That when you look at this triangle here, I don't want you to look at this and say, I'm brand new, I don't know what's happening here. Well, when you look at this triangle, I don't want you to look at this and say, he's trying to say that's who gay people are. No, ma'am, no, sir. I'm showing you who you are. This is us. This is you. Well, I know you've said that, but I just don't think, see, again, I'm not saying every triangle looks like yours. I'm saying you have one, I have one, and guess what? Everybody else has one. And everything that you're hearing through the lens of who you are. You heard the statement, old sermon I heard a long time ago. A guy was walking in. This is back in the early mid-2000s gas crisis. And actually, this is in the 90s or whatever. And he had this truck, and he filled up his truck. And he was walking in, and the guy passing at the gas, he said, how much it cost to fill up that truck? And the guy said, well, he said, it was $36. $36! Now, if you could fill up your car for $36 a day, you'd think, boy, that's pretty good. $36! Wow, that's a lot of money. And this preacher said, you realize about that statement, the man wasn't seeing the $36 as the $36 is. The man was seeing the $36 as the man is, because that's how we see. We don't see things as things are. We see things as we are. There you go, psychology again. I'm trying to tell you, this is the essence of the incarnational experience. The sooner you understand that the perspective that I come at it, that you come at it, that anybody comes at it from who we are, you're on your way to understanding yourself. But once you see that everybody else is coming at it from how they are, now all of a sudden you're getting into something from the eyes of Christ. And think about it, right? All the times in the New Testament, particularly the gospel, why is he talking to her? Because he knew who she was. They saw the caricature of who she was. Why is she touching him? Because he knew who she was. Why is he sitting with them? Why is he dining with them? Because he knew who they were. Why is he over there with Zacchaeus? Because he knew who Zacchaeus was. Why that lady, he should rebuke her if he knew what kind of, because we only know who we are, but Christ knows who they are. And I'm trying to seat us in the place of not just seeing who we are in the triangle, how our biology and our messaging and our environment and exposure and experience has shaped us, but I'm trying to put us sensitive now to see like God sees, to see what? Not just a triangle, but triangles, bumping into each other. That's what we do. Triangle, we bump over here, and another triangle bumps over here, and this triangle bumps. And when we talk about LGBTQ, when we talk about heterosexuality, when we talk about a sexual self-concept, we're talking about these self-concepts pairing up, bouncing up, and who you were, the way you express your sexual self, who you are, the way you express your sexual self, who you will be, the way you express your sexual self, who you came into a marriage as, and how that that bump this way and bump that way. And she wants more and he wants less, and he's feeling less and she's feeling more of this, and he never thought it was about that, but she's just discovering that. She finally realized this, and he always thought that's one thing going on. But not only are the triangles bumping this way, well, I thought you were always this, and you promised me this, and I never thought that, but now I'm feeling things I never thought. Now I finally these are triangles in motion. But guess what else? They're generational triangles. Just like the first series, right? The moms, women, daughters, and girls, the husbands, fathers, men, and brothers that have come down, those triangles are being passed on, and we're passing triangles on. So this is humanity, and God doesn't see us in this weaponized idea of, well, these are the good side and these are the bad side. God sees 7 billion complex human stories, and everybody aiming for the same thing. How do I live this life in dignity? That's what everybody's after. So think of this, our biology, right? Our messaging that we received, our experiences in this glorious messiness that these things are pulling, right? They're pulling our yeses one way, and they're pulling our no's the other way, and the things we think are good about ourselves and the things we think are bad about ourselves, they're complex, right? And they're often in conflict, and they're always changing. And this is what I'm trying to say. And there's a lot of place for hetero people to hear that you're doing okay. You get low desire, high desire. You were promiscuous in your past, or you weren't promiscuous in your past, or you're struggling to connect, or you're in a sexless marriage, or incompatible libido. There's all sorts of conversation carving out a way for heterosexual people in Christian circles to find themselves, locate themselves, be okay with themselves. And the only thing we have for LGBTQ people is stop and then we'll talk to you. And that is not God. And that is not the view that we would have with the light of Christ. And maybe you're a person who says, well, I'm not like that, right? My triangles and all my factors, they're in harmony. What? Who I feel like on the inside and the things that I desire, all the messaging around me tells me I'm okay. Well, I would tell you, sir or ma'am, you are not everybody. And maybe your religious background says, well, my religious background in history and conditioning has no problem with that. But other people's religious background has engineered a self-hatred inside them. It's engineered a charade. It's engineered an imposter syndrome. It's engineered pretending things aren't as they are, or pretending the things that I want I don't want, or pretending the things that I don't want are actually things I do want. I mean, this is the darkness that false religion works in us. And every single one of us is struggling to make sense of it. Every single one of us. In a room full of 1,000 people, 999 are trying to figure out how to move towards a full expression of their true self while also not sacrificing their dignity, others' dignity, or finding out and understanding the things they say yes to today, the things they say no to today, and that of tomorrow, and what it will be. Somebody said, well, I never think about it at all. And guess what? You are not the only person. There have been all the years of your life, 35 years of your life, have filtered you in a place where you never think about it. There are other people who have had a different experience, and it is become an obsession for them over who they are and how they are. And that's not just queer people. It's not just LGBTQ people that are like, well, I'm trying to figure out who I am. There are hetero people, and I know it because they're in my counseling sessions, just trying to figure out this aspect of our lives, which the church says, what does the church say? If you have a thought about it, you're going to hell. If you look at it, you're going to hell. If you act on it, you're going to hell. If you don't do it this way, this time, this place, with this people of this faith, you're going to hell. That's the conditioning. And we say, well, that fits a small part of the congregation. Just look. Now, see, you done run my blood pressure up now. Look at how many headlines of how many preachers over how many years and how many scandals and how many politicians and how many teachers and how many actors and how many civic organizations and how many places are we going to see and icons of history and icons of justice, and we say, oh my gosh, that person, they had a complex sexual side too. You're doggone right they had a complex sexual side, and all the church could do is tisk, 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 you're evil, you're the devil, and the people going tisk, 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 you're evil, you're the devil, they're most often the ones dealing with the most shame in the background. Shame. And I understand that it may seem awkward. I don't want to talk about this, but you're not the only person. Well, I'm at peace. Not everybody is at peace. And it seems somewhere in there is the work of Christ. Now, so I gave you this practical advice, and I'll give it here. We'll just move forward. The practical advice I ended on was, if it feels good, do it. And somebody says, I cannot believe you're saying that. That's the devil. If it feels good, do it. But you know what it is I'm saying and what I'm not saying. So if it feels good, do it. I should just go over and get my neighbor's teenage daughter. You devil, Satan speaks. What did Jesus would say? Get behind me, Satan. Stymie would say, get behind me, Satan, and don't push. You know that's not what I'm talking about. When I talk about if it feels good, do it, I'm asking you to look at what you feel. And why do you feel about this subject the way you feel about it? Maybe you feel hypersexual. Maybe you feel asexual. Maybe you feel devalued. Maybe you feel dirty. Maybe you feel empowered. Maybe you feel victimized. Maybe you're trying to recover power. Maybe you feel vindictive. Maybe you've been hurt. Maybe you're bouncing back. Maybe you're just playing because you got to turn off other pain. What do you feel? I'm asking you to trace the things you feel upstream and see, the things that I feel, do they come from a good place? And then as you think about who you are as a sexual being, then I want you to think about engaging your empathetic imagination and imagining those feelings downstream. If I act on what I'm feeling right now, what will be the downstream feelings? What will my dignity look like? What will the dignity of others look like? Who will be harmed by the fallout? Am I willing to sacrifice the shalom, the peace of others, for the appetite of myself? If it feels good, do it is not if your lust says you want it, take it. That is not that at all. It's saying what we want as human beings is to feel good. And what we desire as human beings is to feel good. And feeling good, it has short-term and long-term. It has before, during, and after. It has self and others. It has an internal and external expression. And I'm trying to move. Well, why don't you just say what you said? That love your neighbors, you love yourself. And the problem with love your neighbors, you love yourself is there's a lot of stubborn ground. It's easy to become dull of hearing. Just love your neighbors, you love yourself. That's your God for sexuality. And we hear that in the choked up, impacted, bowel, constipated, false religion idea. And if you love your neighbors, you love yourself. Okay, that if you love your neighbors as you love yourself was what was on the minds of those moving in colonial conquest. Not because if you love your neighbors and if you love as you love yourself is not the ideal phrase, but sometimes we cannot hear that the truth of God becomes null and void through our traditional filters by which we hear. So I like it. If it feels good, do it. And you hear that as, oh, you're just telling people to just have orgies. I'm not telling people to have orgies or not have orgies. I'm telling people to step back and say, what feelings are driving this? What feelings would come of this? Who is predator? Who is prey? Who stands on equal footing? What is the present feeling, the tomorrow feeling, the next week feeling, the 10-year feeling? What is the feeling by other people's involved? Well, I don't want to engage like that. I know we don't. We want to live by dogmatic religion that only says these are the good people, these are the bad things, doing the good things, they're doing the bad things, they're on God's side, they're on the devil's side, they're going to the good place, we like to deal in black and white dualism. But the truth of the matter is that the humanity that Christ sees, understand it's much more complex and ask us like Christ would always do. He would say, okay, so you can't understand the scriptures about the Sabbath. You're a little confused. Look inside yourself. Would you help your animal if he was hurt? Well, yeah, if you're asking me how I feel about it, I would definitely help my animal. He says, now take what you know in there and bring it out to help other people. Well, I think God's going to get us and strike us dead. He said, well, wait a minute. You're a parent. Look inside yourself. Are you wanting to see your children hurt? No, I'm not wanting to do that. Only a sick person would want to hurt their children. Yeah. Well, then if you then are messed up humans with all these complicated things and you know you want the best for your children, think about how you feel about your kids. Now take that internal thing and bring it out to how God feels about us, trying to point us inward. How do we feel so that we could, pointing us to the earthly, to that which is close, to that which we most thoroughly understand. We know what it's like to feel good. We know when we're touched bad. We know when we touch good. We know when we have something sexual and it leaves us hollow the next day. We know when we can't look at ourselves in the mirror because of the lies that we engaged in. We know that when we engage in things that we have to disconnect, that we can't even be fully present, that we can't talk about, that we step out from and separate our person from our passion. We know that the next day that leaves us hollow. And I'm saying instead of black and white and good and bad and right team and wrong, how about we step back and do what Jesus said and look inside and consider what we know to be true about ourselves and what we know to be true about ourselves. Now let's come out and find out how to put that into application. This is the work that we're doing. And here's a secret. I'll give you a secret. Some say, I don't know, help me. If it feels good, do it. Pastor, I'm gay, or I'm lesbian, or I'm bisexual, or I've been married to a man and I have 4 children, and but now we're divorced and I'm starting to think this might be going on. Well, here's a secret. I'll give you a secret. Maybe you don't know this. Here's the thing. The things that feel good to straight people are the exact same things that feel good to LGBTQ persons. When personhood and pleasure are celebrated in harmony, that feels good. And people can have personhood without pleasure. People can have personhood without engaging and expressing themselves sexually. But I tell you where that runs into trouble for LGBTQ people and for a straight person. Let me tell you where you can have personhood, and I can be a full person and not even be walking in pleasure. But I tell you what you can't do. You can't be a person engaging in pleasure at the cost of personhood. And guess what? Straight people and LGBTQ people. So when I talk about making progress in the ark of Christ, I'm not saying just get into Christ, and when Christ is done working, you won't be queer anymore. You won't be gay. You won't be lesbian. If you just let God do the thing, I'm not judging you. I'm not shaming you, just loving on you, because when God's done working at you, you're going to be the straightest married hetero woman you've ever imagined. That is not true. But I will tell you this. If you figure out that what you really want is your personhood and your passion and pleasure connected and celebrated in harmony, and that it's okay to be a full person without the pleasure and passion and the expression, but you cannot be this sexually passionate and pleasuring person apart from who you are as an individual and apart from who the other person is. That's always going to leave you empty. These are feelings to consider. LGBTQ persons want the same thing that straight persons do. They want a fair sexual and relational exchange among persons who prioritize offsetting shared risk. That's huge. You know what a straight woman wants? She wants to be in a place where the sexual exchange is fair, where it's equitable, where the relational exchange is equitable, and that with a partner who's committed to offsetting risk, which is what that if I'm a straight woman and I want to have a sexual relationship with be it single or married, I'm looking for a person who cares about my personhood and the passion and places my personhood above the passion. Yeah, but I also want a fair and equal and equitable relational and sexual exchange with a person who prioritizes the shared risk, which is what offsetting the shared risk, which is what that if I'm in a relationship with a man, this is even Connie. Connie's in a relationship with me, and her being pregnant or not being pregnant is a very important thing to her. And guess what? It's a shared risk, but it's not an equal shared risk. And she wants to be in a relationship with somebody who tries to balance and offset that risk, prioritize, which is what that if we get pregnant, that it's going to be a bigger cost to Connie than it is to me, and that she's looking for a partner as a heterosexual woman that says, look, you understand that we're in this together. I appreciate that we have our personhood and our passion in harmony, but I also want to be in a relationship with a person that realizes that the risks of what's going on here are greater for me than they are for you. And LGBTQ persons want the same thing. And there's no context in which sexual and romantic relationships are always 100% equal, which is why you have to have a partner who's dedicated. Man to woman, hetero relationships, homosexual relationships. There's never a place. Well, we're both women, we're both men, we're hetero. There are advantages and different advantages. Reconciling disparate standing, right? That's another thing. That where we stand gender, where we stand race, where we stand ethnicity, where we stand in caste and class, where we stand socioeconomic, where we stand familial. That if this relationship breaks down, no problem if you just walk away. No problem if you cheat on me. No problem if you leave me. You've spent all your time building a career. I've been raising the kids. When you leave, I've got nothing. I've got to scramble to survive. When you leave, you get an apartment and keep your check. I mean, all of these things. Or when you leave, you got a huge family that supports you. My parents are dead and my siblings don't speak to me. There's always an imbalance in a relationship. And an LGBTQ person, when I ask you if it feels good, do it. With a heterosexual person, when I say to you, if it feels good, do it. What am I saying? I'm saying look at the things that would feel good. What would feel good? Personhood and passion in connected in harmony. That's what feels good. What feels good is a partner who understands how to offset and prioritize the shared risk. That's what feels good. What feels good is a partner who understands this, that what you bring to the table with your strengths and vulnerabilities and what they bring to the table with their strengths and vulnerabilities are not the same. They're not equal, but they're committing to bringing them into an equitable position by what? By saying, hey, I see what you're putting up here and I'm putting up here, and I'm going to cover you and you're going to cover me, and I'm intending to cover you for the short term, and I'm intending to cover you for the long term, but if life throws us sideways, a curveball, and we figure it out, I'm still a decent person committed to your personhood, even though our physical, relational, romantic thing breaks down. LGBTQ persons want the same thing that hetero persons want. They also crave. LGBTQ persons, hetero persons, they crave, they seek, they desire, and they're all entitled to a yes or a no that's anchored in mutual dignity. Golly. See, I'm talking about pursuing a Christ ethic, and you're saying gay people can never have a Christ ethic. I'm telling you, in the hetero relationships, the yeses and nos are not rooted in mutual dignity. Well, we don't have to ask what feels good. We already know from history and from tradition. And tradition taught us a lot of wrong things. Tradition taught us that no matter what your husband did, as long as he beat you and didn't leave marks, it was okay. Tradition taught us, well, if you're tired of your old lady, you just trade her in and, try to your 36-year-old, you trade her in for two 18-year-olds. And that tradition taught us, once you're married, there's no longer an issue of consent. We got that from tradition. From tradition taught us, stick and marry to your own kind. What does that mean? Don't marry a different color. Don't marry a different ethnicity. Think of all the things that we have. Don't marry a different tribe, a different class, a different nationality, a different religion. That's what tradition taught us. And we go, well, that's ridiculous. You can have love and dignity and romantic relationships and thriving just because people aren't the same race or they aren't the same class or they aren't the same tribe or they aren't the same religion. You can have that. But tradition said no. Tradition said, think of our scripture, that God will pour out violent punishment upon our nations if we develop romantic relationships and marry. Think of the punishment. Think of the thing that Solomon, God said, I want to bless you, I want to keep you, but I got to put the smack down on you because you love the wrong type of women. Think of Moses. He loved the wrong type of women. This is what tradition teaches us, man. If you want to bring the hellfire down on you, marry outside of your clan. And you can take that with a lower KC or a capital K, however you want to, but marry outside of your clan, and there's going to be problems because God don't want people mixing up. That's what tradition taught us. And now we realize that's ridiculous. And guess what? Well, tradition taught us that LGBTQ people what? Or they taught us that what? What did our religion teach us? That God's going to get them. And God's not just going to get them, God's going to get them special. God's going to get them violent. And as a matter of fact, God said in his word, when you come across one, I want you to give them some pre-violence so that when you can tag team me and when they die after you stone them, so I can give them some afterlife violence. That's what tradition taught us. And the same way we've taken well, that's ridiculous. Girls aren't dirty just because they're on their period, and moms aren't double cursed just because they had a female daughter instead of a son. And ladies don't have to sit out of church just because they're on the thing. Or guys that my husband and wife have sex and, well, they got fluids on them, so they're not allowed to come around anybody. They're unclean. We said, well, that's ridiculous. That's what the scripture, that's what our tradition taught. And then we found out, don't marry this, don't take unto you a wife of these people, of that people, the Canaanites, the curse will be on your land. And then we find out, well, that's ridiculous. People can be from different nations and different tribes. We have no problem throwing off all of our violent traditional, we ought not just go out with what feels good. They already figured out what was good and bad. Did they? No, they didn't. Matter of fact, they were longing for our day. That's what's so gross about revival. We need revival. We don't need to go backwards. They were longing to see God in the largeness of how we see God and the ever-enlargedness of how we see God. They weren't going backwards. They were hungry to see it bigger. And we're trying to go backwards to stick with your own kind? Well, Pastor, stop it. Nobody says that anymore. Nobody says that today. Why? Because 60 years ago in the church, the biggest thing was all this interracial marriage. These people bringing these pagan gods from Africa, stealing our sons, corrupting our religion, and stealing our daughters and defiling them. That was what. But you can't get away with that now, because now what was controversial 60, 70 years ago, which had to go to Supreme Court case to keep people from getting arrested, we go, well, that was dumb. I can't believe people thought that way. And I'm trying to bring our church into a place and say, right now, why don't you be ahead of the dumb? Because 60 years from now, we're going to go, yeah, that was dumb. I can't believe we thought that way. You know why we thought that way was bad religion. But true religion, with the eyes of Christ, it brings us out of that falsehood. And that's what I'm pushing for you. Just as we have done with women and kids and marriage, and this idea of divinely imbued territory. God gave us this land and I can kill you because you're on my land. We now realize that's silly. with medicine and disease, right? We've said, well, that's silly. Who was born blind? Who sinned here so that this child was born blind? Jesus, like, are you serious? You think so? This is punishment? Is that how you see this? This is not punishment. This is in this chaotic world, for all this stuff to happen, this is a chance to manifest goodness and love and the not yet world power. That's what this is. Well, we just want to know who's being punished here. Is it the boy that's being punished, or is it their parents? Christ was supposed to bring us out of all that false idea. And you know he has. We've been brought out of a lot of false ideas, but the final frontier for most people in the church, for a lot of people inside the church of, was, well, I'm racism, don't want divine rights to land, no, don't support it. Women are unclean, ridiculous. A woman can't say nothing, can't own her own business, all she can do, that's stupid, Pastor. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you suggest it. What about the dignity of gay people? Well, now the Bible does say, we cling to the written scripture. Why? Because you thought you would come to a church and not be provoked and stretched. I'm enlightened, I go to the church of, I don't believe in all that silly, tribalized, weaponized religion. But yet in series number 2, it started to touch a sensitive area. Not because I was desiring to provoke you, but guess what? As God stretches me over the years, now I want my church to be stretched. And you say, well, I get close. I get close. I can't get all the way with you, Pastor. I'm not concerned about getting all the way with you, because in about 13 minutes here, I'm shutting this series down, and we're going to move on to something else. But guess what? You're going to wake up Monday, and that seed's going to be working in you. It's going to be working in you. What has tradition given us about LGBTQ people? Well, doctrinal violence, rhetorical violence, and actual violence. But what we should have been paying attention, I go back in the Bible, from Genesis, God's hated homosexual people. That's what you should go back in the Bible and say, wow, these people have been around in every part of the story. It's just a new conspiracy by the liberal media trying to push all the gays and the trans down our throat. Now, I ain't going to get away. Dummy. And I say that in love, dummy. These people have been fighting just to not be persecuted and hated since the book of Genesis. Well, all I know is there's a place over there where they lived, and it caught on fire, and it burned them all down. Yeah, I heard the story. I heard 700 Club. I know it's gays in San Francisco. That's why. Yeah, I heard Thailand, the tsunami. I've heard it all. We've heard it all. There's never been a time in which people have, with an anti-Christ religious view, been trying to tell us that the harm that comes to LGBTQ people was somehow God pulling things behind the string. There's never been an anti-Christ a spirit operating in a world like that, all the way to when Jesus, you ought to call down fire on these Samaritans and bring it. He says, you don't even know what spirit you're of. Well, I'm of the spirit of Genesis. I got all the way through here. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, 1 Kings. Look at how many times God called down fire. Why don't you call down fire if you're truly of God? He says, look, I know the book you read. I know your understanding of God. I understand that people with false sight and partial sight pass down to you a partial sight or version of God. But if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, and I would never call down fire on anybody. Well, that's true. He really wouldn't call down fire on my Muslim neighbor. I guess he wouldn't call down fire on my Jewish neighbor, but now my gay neighbor. It leaves us with a question, right? And the question is this. So LGBTQ persons, they've been present in our story at all times and all places. We don't like to talk about it. We don't like to talk about the word eunuchs. We don't like to talk about those type of things. We don't like, what was a eunuch? Well, that was a person that didn't quite fit into, we're not going to call you just a boy or something, just a girl. And what did Jesus say? Well, there are some people who have made themselves eunuchs. They've abstained out of devotion as this monastic idea of let me stay secluded. But then he says there are other people who were born as eunuchs, born as people who just didn't fit this category or that category. Well, that's not how I read it. I know you don't read it in the light of the person of Christ. I read it for 30 years. I read it the same way as God's going to get you. He's getting everybody who's not like me, especially the gay people not like me. I read the same book you do. I got the same sermons you did. I was blinded by the same false religion that you were. I was blinded by the same false religion that John Adams was blinded by when he thought not going to Sunday school and staying up late at the beer club was a bigger threat for judgment than putting people in chains. I had that same false God that you did. But you don't have him anymore. And neither do I. That's why I've been so bold in my declaration. And here's the question, not only regarding LGBTQ, but all people regarding sexuality is this: what should and what shouldn't be? And why or why not? What should be in our sexual life? What shouldn't be in our sexual life? And like all things, we've discovered the answer has to come from somewhere bigger than, well, the Bible says. Because we've discovered that the Bible really doesn't give us all. The Bible sets us in a direction, and if you start out from the beginning and you say, boy, God was wrathful, violent, angry, and real religious and real rigid about customs and things like that, but by the time you get to the prophets, you're like, you're sacrificing all these animals. God don't care about animals. He cares about how they treat you. And then you get over to the New Testament, and Jesus is like, yeah, not just how you treat the people you think are pure and clean, but the people who are just as much the objects of God's love and just as much spiritually connected. I mean, think of all the harlots in Scripture. Think of all the people that Jesus' bloodline comes out of a prostitute. I mean, the Bible's been telling us the whole time, these people with complex sexual stories, just like you. I mean, Potiphar's wife and Jacob and Leah and David and Bathsheba. And I mean, it's just trying to tell us people are complex sexual beings, but we couldn't hear that through the light of Jesus, how Jesus saw them. We heard through the light of the false God projection of how the violent God of the Old Testament saw them. And we said, well, maybe God's new. Maybe Jesus is the happy side of God and God's the sad side, and the Old Testament is the sad side of God. Or maybe when you've seen Jesus, you've seen the Father, and maybe you should allow Jesus to recalibrate your expectation of who God is and how God views them. God, I don't even know if you're out there. I'm just talking to a camera. So let's end on shame. You know, I put in our statement of beliefs, LGBTQ persons. We affirm them, and people just went nuts. I put in there also Muslim persons and Jewish persons, and and people had a problem with that. You trying to say Muslims aren't going to hell? Well, it's interesting. LGBTQ people make up about 8% of our country, 7 to 8%. Bisexuality, lesbianism, trans, it's trending. It's had an uptick. And like everything, what? Look at our thing. Somebody say, what do you mean LGBT? What do you mean it's trending? Exactly what I say. It's shaped by and blown by the winds of culture. It's like Tide Pods. It'll blow in, it'll blow out. Well, there'll be some damage done. There was damage done by Tide Pods. Well, kids got hurt. Kids have gotten hurt in this. But what we do is we take kids getting hurt and use it as a rallying cry to attack and villainize an entire group of people. Many of the people that you're attacking and villainizing are in full agreement with you that we got to stop doing all this stuff to kids. But you can't have that conversation because we're looking for a slight call to arms to become righteous warriors on behalf of God. But culture shapes it, right? But there's about 7%. It's usually in the high 6%, but it's gotten up into the mid 7s, right? 7.5, 7.6 of the population, somewhere in LGBTQ, things like that. And it's interesting, but 2.4% of the population is Jewish, and 1.3% of the population is Muslim. About 7% of the population is Asian. I'm telling you, LGBTQ persons make up a larger percentage than these other groups. And no one would have a problem if I was arguing for their dignity, arguing for their personhood, arguing for their place in our society. If I got up and said, we've got to be mindful with Muslim persons that we don't let a false idea of God weaponize us doctrinally, rhetorically, or in violence to them, and you would say, yes, amen, Pastor, amen. Or we've got to be careful with Jewish persons now. We let these cultural ideas and these false ideas these false biblical ideas, what God's going to do to the nation and all the descendants of Abraham because they rejected Jesus and all that anti-Semitic stuff in the New Testament. We have this, that the people of Abraham are under a curse now and all that. We reject all that. Why? Pastor, teach, because people are getting a lot of anti-Semitic thoughts because the winds of culture are blowing them that way. And when I contend for that and argue for their dignity, I'm doing so for 2.3% of the population, right? Or for 1.4% of the population, 2.4, 1.3. I'm doing that. Or if we're talking about Asian hate, and I'd be talking about that. And you got to think about it. It's not just East Asians, but South Asians. I was, Pastor, but when it gets to LGBTQ, who make up a larger percentage than all that, I don't know why you're spending so much time on that, because they've been in our story from the Bible days to these days. They've been in our nations. Yeah, but they're just putting it out there. They were always in Hollywood. They were always on television. They were always in sports. They were just never allowed to be out in public in sports. Why? Big false idea of God and our false idea of culture. And now that people are finally, not totally, but finally people are starting to say, you know what, I guess they're people too, and we really need to relax. What does the church do? Oh my gosh, I can't believe they're cramming it down our throats. Nobody's cramming it down your throat. It's just that we're in a place of of over-response after decades and centuries of under-response, and we don't need to be freaked out about it at all. I'll tell you how to get past it. Just relent and say, yes, LGBTQ people are persons like I am. They're entitled to the same thoughts I have, entitled to the same desires I have. LGBTQ persons are in agreement with me that children and the vulnerable should be protected at all costs, and the queer people said amen, and the cis people and the hetero people said amen, and the trans people said amen, and everybody says amen, and we're in agreement on that, and there might be some fine points, but I think that the fine points we're much more agreement on than ever before, and the sooner people inside the church say, yeah, what the heck, let's just leave them alone. Guess what? It might not be thrown in their face anymore, but we might not be saying, why are they rubbing our face? We might just see people who are the same kind of people that we are. But you can't get there with false religion. And as I learned, people came on my thing, shaming me. Oh, did you see what he said about sexuality? Did you see what he said? I bet they're gay. I bet they're poly. I bet they're bisexual. I bet they're swingers. As though you're going to say something to me. And what am I supposed to say? When you say that dumb stuff to me, no. Don't misunderstand. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to run from that suggestion. Why? Because I'm supposed to say that you've leveled something shameful to me, and I'm supposed to deny that shameful thing, and I will not do it. I will not do it. Connie and I are not bi. Connie and I are not poly. But like I told you the first week, that one guy said, but we are willing to learn. And 10 points for the church member who got that reference. But at this point in my life, I'm 51 years old, and Connie has been my only ever. And for all intents and purposes, if you really study it back and take out a lot of the trauma from her triangle, I'm really her only ever. It's not really, it doesn't really count when it's by force, but we'll move on. There's a high chance that I'm going to die that way, that Connie will be my only ever. No other person, no other woman, no other man, only ever. That's the truth of who we are. But I used to defend that as though it was some sort of badge of thing, that I was the most rightest of doing it God's way. And other people were okay, but they were always just degrees down from how I'd done it. And that was before I became a Christian. October 28th, 1988, I came to faith in Christ. It was not till the year 2020 that I became a Christian, that I started putting my emphasis not through the doctrinal filter of expressing myself, but through the filter of the person of Christ. And when I became a Christian, I no longer see myself as this highly vaulted, virtuous ideal, that if you're a virgin and you get married and you're only with one person till you die, that's what God wants. That's what gets you the high five. Everybody else, God tolerates it, but just don't, I won't share a glass with you. And I no longer see the world that way. And perhaps the bigger point is this, that if Connie and I were bi, or were poly, or were gay, or whatever, swingers, or whatever else it is, here's the truth of the matter. What is Andy Sam? I'm an adult. Connie and I reserve the right to engage sexually with one another however we choose, with whomever we choose, inside or outside our bedroom, because our ethic is not hetero. Our ethic is not monogamous. Our ethic is not married. Our ethic is Christ, and our ethic is Christ. Christ is dignity. Christ is qualified, conditioned consent that has gone through the process of you love your neighbor as you love yourself, or if it feels good in inside and the outside, in the short term and the long, and to all interested parties, and it yields the fruit of dignity and equality and consent and personhood and passion. That's our ethic. Someone say, what are you trying to say? I've just told you what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that there's a high possibility that my whole life, I'm planning on living 120 years. Now, Connie's 6 days older than me, and if she dies on her 120th birthday, and I die and I'm going to die on my 120th, that means I got 6 days to get her buried, to get on the apps, to find me a lady, and to have me a time, and hopefully I do that. I'm going to get a hotel, Ritz-Carlton, and for 5 days straight until I hit my 120th birthday, die, and I'm going to get on the other side and be with Connie. And so, my gosh, how did you do that? How did you sleep for one woman till you were 119 and 59 days old? How did you do that and manage to have 300 partners in the last 6 days? Because I just had been saving it up. But I will not be shamed. I will not be shamed. And I don't want you ashamed. I don't want you to engage in non-dignity. I don't want you to engage in non-consent. I don't want you to act on your pleasure apart from personhood. I don't want you to take advantage of the unequal risks in relationships. I don't want you to profit from unequal standing in sociosexual. I don't want you to be a predator. I don't want you to be taken advantage of. I don't want any of that for you. But I do not shame you. Somebody said, well, I know what you're doing. You have friends and family who are gay, and you're just changing the scriptures because you're trying to change God's feelings about them. Well, we do have friends and family who are gay. And is there anything wrong with that? I mean, isn't that the whole point of the incarnation? That when God is far, we think God is one way, but when God comes close, we discover he's really not mad at everybody else. Isn't that the whole point? And maybe when my religion was far from LGBTQ people, it was easy to talk about one thing. But when I was face to face with a friend or a neighbor or a family member, oh, wow, maybe God's not like I thought. Isn't that the whole point of the incarnation of Christ? The sad sickness of traditional Christianity and its true dysfunction, and I'm ending here, its true dysfunction, hear me, regarding LGBTQ people is not a dysfunction regarding hetero or homosexual persons. It's a dysfunction regarding sex itself. That it is intrinsic who we are. It is sacred. Every time we try to move it on, every time we try to say it can only be done for this purpose, with these people, in this context, in this position, on that time, not during this time, not during that time, separate beds, together beds. Every time we try to squash it, it ekes out the sides. Why? Because the church has yet to say. Now you may say, I'm completely detached from all this. That's fine. That's you. But study what else is in the Bible. Not only the presence of LGBTQ people, but people over and over and over again whose sexual self got them in trouble at the cost of their own dignity and everybody. But what do we say? Well, the answer to that is just shut it off. Yeah, you just shut it off. You do it only if you're straight, only if you're married, only if you're getting pregnant, only in this way, and then there'll be no problems. But you know what? You try to hold that thing like a shaken up soda, and how many times do we see that break bad? Do you know on websites like the genetic websites and everything else that one of the things that's happened is the number of people who do those things and find out they're related to uncles and siblings and brothers and everything else, to find out that this DNA doesn't match. How do I have a different father and a mother and they have the same DNA? Because they find out it's a relative. It's everywhere. What we're doing is we push all sex to the darkness, and what happens is the good parts of us that can be expressed with dignity, mutuality, and hetero and homo capacities, that gets lumped in with the predatory part of us, and people in those places end up hurting each other, and we say, look at that, everybody over there who's not married, who's not hetero, who's not only doing it for reproduction, for procreation, everybody else is bad. And what we have is a lot of people who are living very complex but very rich lives over there, jumbled in with people who are costing dignity and violating the vulnerable and children. And we've got to bring that out so that people who are not like us can also be fully complex sexual beings, wanting the same thing we do with their biology, with their messaging, with their nano, micro, and macro experiences and exposures. And they live a fully dignified life committed to a Christ ethic, like we're living a dignified life committed to a Christ ethic. And for those people over there who are violating, we have to deal with them temporally. We have to deal with them medically. We have to deal with them mentally. We have to deal with them legally. We have to deal with them punitively. We have to protect children. We have to protect the vulnerable. But when I talk about LGBTQ people and you lump them over there with the violators and predators of the children and the people, we got to get them out first to the place where we see them like us, and then we together can go in to where the true pain, and the true pain that's happening in families is not by, 9 out of 10 times, it's not by LGBTQ persons, it's by hetero persons upon hetero persons. And we know this, but religion doesn't let us be honest about it. And for families, as I close, you say, Pastor, I thank you for this series. I've got a child, I've got a brother, I've got this. It's really helped me because my religion was really speaking to me. I get it. Connie tells a story when we first met about parents of special needs children, and she said, this couple was flying to Paris, and they were going to go to Paris, and they'd always dreamed about going to Paris, and they had all the brochures, and they had all the books, and they had always read, and they had planned it, and they'd saved for it, and they'd set aside. And on their way to Paris, ladies and gentlemen, there's an issue, and we're going to have to divert. Paris is flooded underwater, whatever it is, and so they've been closed, quarantined, whatever. So we're going to go for Holland, and they end up in Holland, and Holland wasn't what they expected. It wasn't what they had dreamed. And they were disappointed. They were confused. But they got over there and they found out well, Holland is really beautiful too. And if you find out, well, man, my dad, he divorced my mom, and 2 years later he came out as gay, and Pastor, it's shocking to me, or my daughter, or my son, or my grandson, and my sister, and just I don't know what to make of it. Guess what? Holland is beautiful too. Is it painful? Yeah. Is it shocking? Yeah. Does it take time? Yeah. But I want the seed of what I'm trying to say to paint a larger picture. Paint the larger. Well, I feel like I failed. Failed how? We've all failed as parents. But the failure does not necessarily result, well, I failed as a parent, so therefore my child is triangle looks like that. That's a ridiculous idea. Because we're not just our experience. We're not just the failure of our experience, of our parents. We are our biology. We are a message. Yeah, but I taught them this. You might have taught them that on the micro. You might have taught them that on the macro, but people get nano information. Well, I always thought they were this. I was watching over them the whole time, but people have nano experiences and micro experiences. You're not responsible for shifting and shaping and determining a person's sexual expression their whole life. What you're responsible for is enlarging your heart, and I know you do, to still see them as 100% of a person, even if you're in Holland, you say, boy, I got to get to know this place because it's not what I had dreamed about and had up on my vision board. But guess what? It's beautiful too. Had a person come to me in my old church. He's passed on. He said, my son has come home and said he's gay. He wants to bring his boyfriend, and I will not let him in this house. I will not let them at Thanksgiving. I will not mock God. And I said, be careful, because you're trying to play hardball because you think because God played hardball, if you play hardball with them now, God won't play hardball with them later. And I said, you're missing out on the most beautiful part of your child's life. And man, we went round and round about it. But he finally called me and he says, you know what, you're right. I said, come home and sit. Just be at my table. Why? Because there's a triangle that I don't understand, and it's not who I am, but I realize it's not who you are. And all I'm asking for you, son, is not that you would be like I am, or not that you would fulfill my dreams, but I'm asking for you, son, to make sure that when you're out there, that you're seeking what you deserve as a person, and that what you're doing is feeling good. And I don't mean feeling good in the interim. I don't mean feeling good in the immediate. I mean it feels good for you and for them, and that you're not running from something broken, or you're not running to something broken, but that you have what I have in a relationship, that you would seek personhood and passion in harmony, that you would seek to offset risk, and that you would have a partner who also understands the vulnerabilities of what it means to love and what it means to connect, because that's what I want and that's what you want, and it is the dream that I have for my son. So even though I'm not where I thought I was going, I am at a place where that dream is still possible, and that is all part of these triangles. My last line is this. What we're truly trying to figure out is, who am I? And who might I have been? Had my biology not been this way, or the messaging, or my experience and my exposure, I don't know. And let me tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth right now. Well, if I this, and if only that, and if I had not said this yes, or if I had said this no, or if when I wanted to say yes, I didn't say no because the culture told me I wouldn't, or when I said no, I didn't say no because I wanted to say yes. I mean, whatever that is, here's the truth is, you are who you are. And I'm not trying to change you from who you are. I'm trying to take you exactly as you are and prioritize for you that LGBTQ and hetero persons have the exact same aim, the Christ ethic, dignity and consent. They have the exact same aim, personhood and passion in harmony, in harmonious celebration. They have the exact same aim, prioritizing the prioritization of offsetting shared risk. They have the exact same aim, a recognition of the inequitable nature of romantic and physical partnerships, and a commitment to make sure that those inequities are cured and protected. That is what I'm pointing you to. I'm not pointing you to a cessation of queerness. I'm pointing you toward the full light and dignity of Christ without shame. And I love you. And I love you if you hate everything I've said. And I love you if you love everything I said. And I love you if you think I pushed it too far. And I love you if you think I didn't go far enough. I love you because now the seed is working in you. And guess what? It's working in me. And it's not making our sight smaller. It's making our eyes, our vision bigger. In Jesus' name. Listen, your support means everything. Think of the past month. We're closing out a month. You say, oh, I've been watching every week. The question is, have you sat down this past month and said, I need to communicate This was a tough one for me, Pastor, but you're right. I'm coming out of it. I see it bigger than I saw it before. Then I want you to communicate that to us. We don't even know that you watch. We don't even know that you. Well, I'll tell you that. Yeah, but this is the exchange here is not. Well, I get to come and I get to eat and I get. Whoo, this really helps me, and I disagree with that. It's not a cafeteria. No collard greens, please. But I will take some black-eyed peas. That's not what's happening here. If you say, look, you are my pastor, and I look back and my life and my family are being impacted. We thank you for your support. But guess what? That's today. Church goes on Monday. We have church tomorrow. We have church Monday. We have church Tuesday. We have Wednesday morning, Wednesday night. We have Thursday Bible study, Thursday prayer group. We have Saturday morning prayer group. Pastor, I don't have time for all that kind of stuff. Our church goes all the time. Our church meets 7 days a week. The church hub meets 7 days a week. We are on church, doing church 7 days a week. What do you mean? But we're not coming to a building. As a matter of fact, I don't even know what you're doing. But you got church tomorrow, which is what? You're going to wake up and find out, God today brings somebody across my path, an opportunity to ease, eliminate, prevent suffering, to comfort, to humanize, to see, to pray, to anoint, to heal, to love, to hug, to donate, to give, to finance, to call, to reach out, not around the world, although around the world, not in a refugee camp, although in a refugee camp, not in a place where it's $1 a day and people are dying of poverty, although right there too, but right across my kitchen table, right across my street, right across the office from me. How do I go about as Christ did when Christ was incarnate God, love in human form, to go about doing good and healing all who are oppressed of darkness? That's it, your message for June 30th, 2024. I'll be back next week with a brand new series. Connie and I love you. We pray for you. Peace, health, protection, preservation, joy, wholeness, light. If I could reach through and hug every one of you, I'd hug you. I'd cry with you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Connie loves you. My whole family loves you. All of you. You make it a great week.